says, your remedy is within you, but you do not sense it. Your sickness is from you, but you do not perceive it. You presume you are a small entity, but within you is enfolded the entire universe. Everything we're going to talk about today, whether we mention psychology, whether we mention science, whatever we mention, we are going to be trying to unfold one hadith for Imam Ali alayhi salam. And this narration is one of my favorite narrations. And it's a hadith, inshallah, that you might find very empowering to understand and to internalize. So I'm going to share this hadith with you now. And I want you to keep it in mind. And the deeper we go into tonight's talk, we're going to be trying to unpack this hadith. And this is the hadith by Imam Ali alayhi salam in Nahj al-Balagha. He says, your remedy is within you, but you do not sense it. Your sickness is from you, but you do not perceive it. You presume you are a small entity, but within you is enfolded the entire universe. The Imam is speaking about us as the human being. He's saying that sometimes we look at ourselves. He says, تَظُنْ أَنَّكَ جُرْمٌ صَغِيرٌ وَفِيكَ انْطَوَى الْعَالَمُ الْأَكْبَرُ. Where you start to have these fearful thoughts and this disbelief and lack of belief in yourself, and you feel like it's the whole world that's happening and the sickness is coming from outside of you. Imam is saying, no, he doesn't start with the sickness. He says, before we talk about sickness, no, whatever the sickness is, that your remedy is within you. The solution is within you. But you can't see it, you don't perceive it yet. You don't sense it yet. And your sickness is from you, but you don't know how. So tonight, inshallah, we're going to try and unpack this hadith and see how do we find anxiety, for example, as this experience that we have within ourselves and internally. How do we find the remedy and the solution from within ourselves as well? Where's the power that I possess over this? And when we talk about anxiety, we know that most of us experience anxiety. We experience it at different levels, at different times, but we all experience anxiety. So tonight, inshallah, we'll dive deep into this. By the end of tonight's talk, inshallah, you should have a comprehensive understanding of anxiety. We're going to talk about what it is. We're going to talk about the causes of anxiety, the different factors. We're going to talk about how we can reframe and change the way we perceive it. We're going to talk about a framework that can help you understand your emotions in general and anxiety more specifically. And finally, inshallah, we're going to delve into some practical strategies to how to use anxiety as a strength rather than it bringing you down. And throughout the talk, I would like you to keep the words of the Imam in your mind. Inshallah, we'll keep referring back to them. So firstly, let's start with what is anxiety? Anxiety is a natural physiological response to stress. It's how your body reacts to stress. And it's essentially an internal alarm system that tells you, hey, there's a potential danger here. There's a potential danger here. And it just, because you have anxiety, it allows you to navigate through this danger in a careful way to protect you. So it's like, for example, imagine if you've been on a camp, you're walking in at night in the middle of a forest, for example, or next to the bushes, and you hear a rattling sound in the bushes. And what do you start to feel? You start to feel your heartbeat. You start to breathe in a particular way, right? It's like your senses become enhanced. You're ready for whatever's about to happen. That's anxiety kicking in. Now, you realize if I didn't have that anxiety, if I didn't have that reaction in the moment, then we'll just all walk around and no one cares. And 1,000 years ago, if a lion was to come at you, you wouldn't react, you wouldn't protect yourself. You wouldn't have that response. So anxiety is a very natural response. That's the first thing we've got to understand. It's a natural response to stress. And now when does this response become sort of problematic? It becomes problematic when it's triggered too often, when it keeps coming up, or too intense, when it comes at a very... And it's very important also to distinguish the difference between a state of anxiety, so a person who's experiencing a state, right now I'm about to go into an exam and I'm feeling anxious in the moment, and a trait of anxiety, of someone that is constantly experiencing anxiety in a repetitive manner. So state of anxiety and a trait of anxiety. Inshallah, we're going to unpack this more throughout the night. But when you hear of anxiety disorders, right, we're not talking about state of anxiety, we're talking about trait of anxiety. So whilst you might experience anxiety like every single other person, a person who has a trait of anxiety is someone that's lived with the emotion repetitively for a long period of time. And we're going to talk about why this happens soon in the second part of tonight's talk. But like, I'll give you an example. There's what's called the generalized anxiety disorder, right? Generalized anxiety disorder, and without going too deep into it, is different from both state and trait. It's not something that you just experience in the moment, and it's not something that's just developed. Generalized anxiety disorder is when you have excessive worry every single day, and it lasts for a long time, this worry. You're always afraid what's about to happen. You're afraid of very little things. This can be usually triggered by traumatic responses. So it's not necessarily a trait that a person has repetitively felt anxious and allowed it, but more it's intense traumatic experiences in your upbringing that trigger this. So I'm not going to go deep into that, but it's just important to note. So we understand what anxiety is. It's a natural response. So what is the mechanism? This is super important. It helps you, when you understand mechanism, brothers and sisters, when you're able to label and identify and sort of imagine almost and visualize what's happening inside of you, automatically you start to have more control. So what is the mechanism of anxiety? What's actually happening in our brain, in our body, when anxiety is coming up? So at its core, anxiety triggers what's called the fight or flight response. And it's governed by what's called the autonomic nervous system. Like I said, don't worry about linguistics and terminology, just understand. There's a system in your body called the autonomic nervous system, and this system has two branches. It's got the fight or flight response, which is activated. It's called the sympathetic nervous system. It's got nothing to do with sympathy, like, you know, feeling bad for someone. Sympathetic nervous system. And when this system in your body is activated, what activates in your body is fight or flight. Basically, all the blood from your brain starts to become dispersed in the parts of your body that's going to help you either fight whatever's happening around you, something you're afraid of, or run away. So that's the sympathetic nervous system working. On the other side, you have the parasympathetic nervous system, and that is what's called the rest and digest. That's what helps you calm down. So when you perceive a threat, when you perceive an intense threat, like for example, the person walking in the bush and he hears the rattling sound, or for example, the other day we saw there was an accident on Forest Road, right? And there was someone driving, and in the moment he saw a truck going in front of him. If that system, the sympathetic nervous system, didn't activate in the moment, he would have kept driving normally. But because he perceived threat, a certain part of his body was activated, so he was able to make quick decisions. And you've probably seen it in your life where sometimes you're in a position, you're like, bro, I didn't even know I could do that. And you come up with decisions on the spot. That's the sympathetic nervous system in play. So when you perceive a threat, what happens is your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. It starts to release adrenaline and other stress hormones, and these are released in the body, and it prepares your body to escape or to confront the danger. Your heart rate increases, your muscles start to tense, you breathe in a particular way. And this response is very beneficial, right? If the person on Forest Road didn't have that response, something might have happened, right? Or even in your day-to-day life, if there are certain periods, or if this part of your body isn't activated, you're under huge threat. The problem is when this is activated for a long time, over a long time. So if you're in that state of fight or flight for 6 hours, right, and you're feeling and experiencing that fear for 6 hours straight, for 6 days a week, it becomes detrimental. It's no longer serving you. It's now negatively impacting you. And inshallah, tonight I'm going to touch on a powerful factor or a powerful tool on how to transport the focus from the sympathetic nervous system, so from fight or flight response, to the parasympathetic nervous system. So how to switch from being afraid to calm. And we're gonna touch on what's called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is basically a nerve that runs from your brain to your abdominal. That's why when you're sort of afraid, sometimes you feel butterflies in your stomach. So that's the mind and body connection in play. So how can we use our body to take control of the anxiety that we're experiencing? We'll talk about that in a moment. But just to note that there are many behaviors that we use as coping mechanisms for anxiety, for this fear that comes up. One of these mechanisms is worry. You know, when you say, I'm worried, see, I'm worried is not an emotion. It's really anxiety that's emotion. What I'm worried is, it's the thinking part of anxiety. It's the chain of negative thoughts that you have. You know, the negative thoughts that you have about, what if I fail? What if this happens? What if that happens? The thinking of the worst possible case scenario. That's worry. And then you have avoidance. Avoidance is also not an emotion. It's a behavior. When there's something that you're afraid of, that you're anxious about, you avoid it. That's where procrastination comes in, right? You start to avoid the thing that you're afraid of. So these are two behaviors it's important to identify. When you're feeling worried about something and you have these negative thoughts, you could almost certainly realize that there is some level of anxiety underlying that. Instead of coping with that emotion of anxiety with worry, there's another way that you can cope with it. Inshallah, we'll share that in a moment. An example of something that you could replace a thought. Let's say you're worried about something, right? You're worried about an exam going wrong, or a job going wrong, or a meeting going wrong, whatever it is, and you're having all these negative thoughts. One powerful thought process you could replace it with, instead of thinking about all the negative things, is إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُكَلِّفُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not place a burden on a soul unless He's capable. So God's put this burden on my soul, therefore I'm capable. Right? So in any situation that you're in, you can constantly reframe it in the moment and change the meaning of it. But we'll touch more on that in a moment. So that's the mechanism of anxiety. We said that there's a sympathetic nervous system, it activates fight or flight, and that's a natural response. Now I want to go to section 2, the second part of our talk, which is, what are some key causes of anxiety? You might tell me right now, like, how do I know if I have anxiety or not? And where does it come from? Why you or I have anxiety? There are biological factors, there are psychological factors, and there's environmental factors. I'm going to unpack all of these and give you an example for each one. From a biological basis, anxiety can have origins in genetics. People are genetically predisposed to have anxiety. Some people, it runs in their family. It can make people more susceptible to this. It's not to say that if your dad has anxiety or your mom has anxiety that you must have it. It can be triggered easier in you if your parents have it. And also from another level, there is also neurochemical imbalances. When there's imbalances in your brain with like serotonin and dopamine and things like social media addiction, right? Social media addiction, pornography addiction, all of these types of addictions, they play with these neurochemical imbalances. That's why it starts to induce anxiety. So when there's neurochemical imbalances, these chemicals can transmit signals to the brain and they can contribute to the anxiety that you're feeling. And an example of this is, have you ever met someone that says, I can't drink caffeine because it makes me feel jittery, it makes me feel too anxious? And then you have another person that drinks caffeine and makes them feel energized. Some people have different neurochemical reaction to caffeine, and it can cause anxiety. And this also can be it can stem from genetics or the neurochemical imbalance. Then we've got the psychological factors. The psychological factors are our thought patterns and our perceptions that we have towards life in general, towards certain experiences that we have. Like, for example, who knows someone that always thinks about the worst possible outcome? Constantly always thinking about the worst possible outcome, right? That's a cognitive distortion, meaning it's your mind distorting reality. It's creating a different image of reality. And that's called catastrophizing. When you expect the worst possible outcome, it's called catastrophizing. Then you have another form, which is, for example, overgeneralizing, where you see one bad event, or you go to a restaurant one time and you have a bad experience, and that's it. This is the worst restaurant I've ever been at, and I'll never go to it again. You have one experience and it generalizes overall. These are psychological factors that can create sort of induce anxiety as well. Because what happens is you create a negative feedback loop in your mind, in your brain. And it goes from, I had a negative experience, I came to this place, I had a negative experience. Next time I come to this place, I'm going to have a negative experience. So now internally, you're certain that I'm going to have a negative experience. The first time I done public speaking, everyone laughed at me. So the next time I do public speaking, people are going to laugh at me. So I'm not going to do public speaking because it induces fear. Right? That's overgeneralization. So we've got different distortions that sort of ruin what's actually happening. It's like looking through a mirror, right? Or looking through, a mirror, and the mirror is dirty. Because the mirror is dirty, everything it reflects is going to be incorrect. It's going to be dirty, right? So that's what the cognitive distortions happen, and it starts to play a role on your anxiety. And one other way, for example, that you can change or manipulate this is through the Holy Quran, is just by understanding that, for example, asa an takrahu shay'an la'allahu khayrun lakum, right? That don't hate something that you're experiencing right now, because maybe it's going to be good for you. And don't love something too much, because maybe it's going to be bad for you. So keeping a balance, right? So don't catastrophize and make it like this is going to be the worst experience, but allow yourself to be in the moment. Then we have environmental factors. Environmental factors play a huge role in our anxiety levels. Like, for example, you're going through a stressful life event. You're going through a divorce. You have financial and economical problems, right? These play a role. That's why you find a lot of families, a lot of parents, a lot of mothers and fathers, relationships, they're negatively impacted, and there's a lot of anxiety being created in the children even. This is how anxiety is passed on to children, right? Because there's anxiety within the parents because of financial hardship, because of stressing over things they can't control. And then the children start to absorb this anxiety and start to feel it. So environment plays a huge role on your development of anxiety. And of course, like we said, ongoing stresses. Now, by understanding the different biological, psychological, and environmental impacts or elements to anxiety. Now, when you feel it, you could start categorizing. You could categorize what you're experiencing. And inshallah, by the end of the talk, you can put all of this together and start to put your hand exactly on what you're feeling. So now we've understood, where anxiety comes from. Now I want to talk to you guys about the concept of reframing. And reframing is a very powerful tool that is essentially, it's the process of changing the way we think about a situation to alter its emotional impact. A perfect example of this is Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam. So when Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam was able to, when Ubaydullah bin Ziyad told her, how do you perceive what God has done to your brother, right? She said, I see nothing but beauty. So what she's done is she's reframed this massacre into a positive outcome. So it had a less of an emotional impact. So reframing is a powerful tool, and mental health professionals use it. You find it in cognitive behavioral therapy and all different types of therapy. And one of the main reasons why we have this phenomenal tool is because of something that we mentioned in last time's talk a couple of weeks ago on identity of neuroplasticity. If you guys remember, I mentioned something called neuroplasticity. And that is, by changing our thought patterns, we can actually change the structure and the function of our brain. If you think about when you're young and you're learning, when you're in school, it's like a spider web. A spider web, every time you learn something new, you're adding a new web to this spider web. It becomes like this network of spider webs. And every time you learn, you're adding new things. Your brain has the ability to do that because of neuroplasticity. So your brain molds itself to your thought. And so because of this phenomena, you're able to, if you're, for example, having negative thought patterns about a specific thing, a specific experience, like let's say, for example, public speaking, or getting ready for exam, or whatever it is, and you've got negative thoughts, what happens is this thought turns on in your mind and it activates all of the other negative feedback loop. Now, by just changing the one negative thought, you could change the way your brain reacts to this whole event. And that's what reframing is called, and that's through neuroplasticity. So I want to provide you guys with 2 techniques, induce neuroplasticity, and help you reframe your anxiety, to change when you're experiencing anxiety in the moment, to change how it feels. The first is called cognitive restructuring. Basically what it means is you're identifying and you're challenging your negative thoughts. And if you say, what are the negative thoughts? We all have this inner conversation. You know, you're not crazy if you talk to yourself in your mind. We all talk to ourselves in our mind. And sometimes the voice is very negative. Sometimes we're beating ourselves up, right? When you start to think stuff like, I'm going to fail, I'm not good enough, they're going to laugh at me or so on. Instead of accepting that thought, stop, take a deep breath, and change in the moment, change the language that you use to describe the event. So for example, instead of saying, I'm going to fail, you'd say, I'm going to face challenges, but I'm going to prepare and I'm going to do my best. Or for example, even if I don't, do 100, if I don't get the best result, I know I'm going to learn from my mistakes. You're shifting the focus from external and what people are going to think about me to internal. And how can I restructure how I'm thinking about the situation? I'm going to do this exam. I'm going to do good. I'm going to try my best. If I don't do good, then I know for next time I have to study harder, right? You can apply it to different things. The second thing is you want to counter these negative thoughts by asking yourself for evidence. Ask yourself, why am I going to fail in this exam? Why, what makes you think that I'm not going to be accepted by this group of friends? Who said that this job is going to be bad? Who said that I'm going to fail in this interview? Just because I gave a speech when I was in year 3 and I didn't do well, it doesn't mean that now I'm going to give a speech and people are going to laugh at me. So changing the way you counter these negative thoughts. The second technique is perspective shift. And that is when, instead of seeing anxiety as something that's bringing you down, and a lot of people feel this, right? They say, I want to get rid of my anxiety. Anxiety is hurting me. It's bringing me down. It's limiting me. Instead, you want to change your perspective. Instead of looking at anxiety as something negative, what you want to do is you want to look at it as a signal, as a guardian. Why is this part of my nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, being lit up right now? What is the fear really? What am I afraid of? Be curious about it, right? Not, oh my God, why am I feeling like this? But no, really, why am I feeling like this right now? And trying to see what is actually happening inside of you versus judging what's happening inside of you. Now, if we go back to the quote of Imam Ali alayhi salam, we said that your remedy is within you and your illness is from you. Now we're seeing how the remedy is within me. Because by learning how to reframe, by learning how to change the way I think about what I'm experiencing, and knowing neuroplasticity, by knowing that, literally by changing the way I think about this and the way I speak about this, I'm going to change how I feel. That's you reclaiming power. That's you reclaiming your ability to change how you want, or choose how you want to feel, essentially. Because you're now seeing that your remedy is within you. I want to introduce you guys to a framework that is very powerful in the field of self-awareness. And this is the inner kingdom framework. I'm just going to brush over the inner kingdom framework and then inshallah give a practical application of it and apply it to anxiety. And then we'll conclude the talk with some practical strategies. The inner kingdom framework is all about reclaiming power and control over all the different components of myself. And it's comprised of 5 key characters. So imagine within you right now is a little kingdom, and there's 5 key components of this kingdom. The soul is the king, the true essence of who you are. In Arabic, ar-ruh. The prime minister is the mind. And you've got the conscious mind, you've got the subconscious mind, but the mind is what manages this kingdom, the day-to-day affairs, the thinking, the reasoning, the logical decision-making and planning. Then you have the throne, Al-qalb, the heart. The heart is where love resides. It's where you connect with other people. It's where you connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The heart is the domain that allows you to pursue deep connection. Then you've got the guardians. The guardians of the kingdom are your emotions. And their goal is to guard you, to alert you to any potential threats, so to take you away from pain and to bring you towards comfort. That's all the guardians are doing. Any emotion that you have, its sole purpose is to guard you and to protect you. And then you've got the body, which is the palace. And the palace is what houses this inner kingdom. So if we wanted to apply this framework to anxiety, or for example, we wanted to use an analogy. Firstly, we're looking at the guardian, we're looking at emotions as our guardians. So anxiety, if I'm feeling anxiety right now, it's coming to protect me, it's coming to guide me. So let's say you're feeling anxious, you're gonna give a public speech and you're feeling anxious. That's the guardians coming up. The guardians are alerting you, they're telling you, hey, there's something happening, very important event, you're about to go up on stage, you're about to speak in front of a lot of people, be careful. So this is really important right now. Don't take this as a negative. I'm just telling you, just watch out. This is very important. And it's going to continue doing that. Just watch out. It's important. Okay? Watch out. And you're just, okay, what else? So now that you've understood, so the guardians come and it's telling you, all right, there's anxiety. Then the prime minister comes in. The mind comes in, takes control. He says, all right, so I've got to talk. I need to prepare. I'm going to go and get my speech. I'm going to prepare my speech. I'm going to make sure I'm confident. I'm going to rehearse my speech. Maybe give the speech in front of someone. Then you tap into the throne, the heart. Why am I giving this speech? Why is this important? What am I going to achieve from this speech? And how is it aligned with my values? Then you go to the palace. All right, am I taking care of my body? Am I breathing correctly? Am I taking deep breaths? Did I sleep well enough? Am I physically prepared for this? Once you've had this dialogue and you've prepared each component of the inner kingdom, then the guardians are now at rest. They're at ease. They just told you there's a threat. You allowed the mind to come and do its job. You allowed the body to do its job. And you allowed the heart to do its job. And then the anxiety calms down. Okay? And inshallah, I'm going to give you guys practical ways to apply this in your life. But the foundation of this, you find this a lot in, psychologists use this in what's called cognitive behavioral therapy, where they're trying to change the way you think about things using your behavior, using your body, using your language. I feel like I've been speaking for so long, man. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Let's conclude this talk with some practical strategies, some tools, and to help us manage and overcome anxiety. When I say overcome, I'm not saying we get rid of anxiety. We know now that anxiety is not negative, it's how we react to it and how we use anxiety. I want to introduce you to a method. There's many methods, but I want to give you a method that you're going to remember. And I'll tell you how I know you're going to remember it, because it's called the BMW method. How can you forget it? The BMW method. Hello? And essentially the BMW method is, it's combining three different elements. It's combining your breath, your mind, and your words. So it's a practical technique for managing anxiety, and this can happen. So what you're doing with the BMW method is you're calming that autonomic nervous system. Remember how we said that when you perceive threat, your sympathetic nervous system clicks, your fight or flight. But you want to go into rest and digest. You want to calm down the autonomic system. So how do you switch from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system? From fight or flight to calm and rest. This is how. So first, we want to utilize our breathing. If you try and remember any time that you've ever had anxiety, you almost always realize that it's very closely tied to how you're breathing. The harsher the anxiety you're experiencing, the faster that you're breathing, right? So your breath plays a huge role in communicating between the mind. Remember that the vagus nerve that I mentioned earlier? The vagus nerve, it goes from the nervous system, it goes through to the vagus nerve, and it allows your body to activate the calm response simply through the way you breathe. So One good way that you can, one powerful way that works instantly on the spot, like right now, literally as I'm speaking, you could try it and it'll help you, is you take 2 sharp inhalations, so, and 1 very slow exhalation, as if you're exhaling from a straw. What you'll feel your heart rate instantly slowing down, instantly. And what's happening is your body is telling your body, your nervous system is communicating through to your body and telling your body, to your guardians, calm down. It's okay. Relax. So that's one way. Another way is called box breathing. So you inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. You hold for 4 seconds and you exhale for 6 seconds. That's another way. So that's the first part of the B&W method. So you want to incorporate breathing. Second is you want to switch your focus. You remember how we were talking about reframing? Reframing, basically. We want to switch our focus from what's going wrong, the panic, to what are the guardians trying to tell me right now? I'll give you an example in my life, right? Once I was working on a lecture or something, and I felt like I was experiencing an anxiety attack. Like, literally my heart started to palpitate and I got really afraid. And I started breathing, taking deep breaths, and I started to ask myself, instead of like, oh, I'm anxiety, this, that, I started to ask myself, why am I feeling this? What's happened in the past couple of hours or day or two that's allowing me to feel this anxiety? And I kept thinking, and I'm breathing at the same time. Then I realized what the problem was. It's that I was dehydrated. I had too much caffeine that day and not enough water. And that's why I was feeling that my body was reacting to anxiety, but it wasn't really anxiety, it was just dehydration. So what did I do? I drank water and I was good. The anxiety was gone. So by switching your focus from what's going wrong to what is my body trying to tell me, that you can apply that. The third is your words. And this is where things like dhikr come in, by the way. You want to repeat an affirmation, you want to repeat a word, you want to repeat a phrase or a sentence. In that moment, just one sentence that can bring you back to a normal state. So when we talk about, for example, Alhamdulillah, yeah? Instead of just saying Alhamdulillah, 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 like as a tasbih, because I want ajr in the akhirah, inshallah you'll get it. Also, you can use Alhamdulillah to calm yourself in the moment, to focus on the present moment. So whilst you're breathing, whilst you're changing the way you're perceiving your anxiety, you can repeat a phrase like Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, or for example, you could say, I'm capable, I'm capable, I'm good enough, I'm good enough, I'm good enough. This too shall pass, this too shall pass. Inna ma'al usri yusra, inna ma'al usri yusra. Whatever it is, for example, ma ra'aytu illa jamila, ma ra'aytu illa jamila. I saw nothing but beauty, I saw nothing. Reminding yourself of a phrase in the moment to allow your mind to centralize on a thought. Because if you don't say something to control it, then your mind's going to continue to where the anxiety is. So as you're trying to change what you're thinking about, you want to repeat something to stick to one thought process. I hope that makes sense and is clear. Finally, I want to conclude with some long-term strategies. Now, the first long-term strategy of battling anxiety for the people that want to overcome anxiety, we've already done it, which is tonight. Simply by learning and becoming aware of what anxiety is and this emotion, and being able to point at it, being able to understand what are the different elements going in, what are these guardians trying to tell me, that by itself is a good first step. You're not judging it, you've understood the mechanism of it, you understand why it's important that I have anxiety, that if I didn't have anxiety it would be very detrimental to me. Now that you've understood this, now these are I'm going to provide you 5 things that you can apply in your life on a day-to-day basis, which will significantly, science-based by the way, it's science-backed, significantly improve your reaction to anxiety, and that's all forms of anxiety, right? Whether it's a state or a trait. First is mindfulness and meditation. Implement a 5 to 10 minute time frame in your day where you just sit down and meditate and just be present in the moment. Don't try and achieve anything. Don't try and think about anything. Don't try and do anything. Just meditate and be present in the moment. And that's different to your prayers and all of that and Quran and Qira'ah. In this time, all you're trying to do is ground yourself. Second is exercise. Regular exercise has a huge impact on the autonomic nervous system that we mentioned before. It can help regulate it. So any form of exercise, you could be in whatever form you like, but a daily routine of 20, 30, 40 minutes of exercise can go a long way in the long term. Third is your lifestyle choices, like maintaining healthy diet, sleeping well, drinking enough water. All of these things. Remember, the palace is deeply intertwined in the inner kingdom. If you're not taking care of your body, then your emotions are going to suffer. And every part of yourself is going to suffer. So we've got the healthy lifestyle choices. Fourth is journaling. Brothers and sisters, journaling your thoughts and your feelings can probably be one of the most transformative experiences that you have. Journaling. Writing down how you feel, writing down what you're thinking. Put a book in front of you and ask yourself a question. Why am I feeling this way? Why did I get stressed today? Why was I so anxious? Why did I react like this? Ask yourself these questions, and I promise you, because you might be saying, but I don't know what to write when I want to journal. I promise, if you just put a pen and paper in front of you and write a question, all you have to think about is a question, by yourself you start to see answers come up. And what is put on paper, and you're able to see your thoughts and your emotions without anyone's judgment. You're not telling anyone. You're not telling anyone how you think or how you feel. You're telling yourself. You're looking at it. You're no longer thinking it. You're seeing it. And you're able to choose otherwise. So journaling your thoughts and your feelings can go a long way. Fifth, finally, and most importantly, is developing a strong relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Developing a strong relationship with God is essential, because ultimately we believe that ala bi dhikrillah tatma'innul qulub, right? It's that with God that our hearts find ease, because everything else is limited. Whether if you latch your rope of hope, of energy, of motivation, to anyone but God, you're going to be limited. Whereas when it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's unlimited. So developing a strong relationship, and these are some practical way that I'd like to share with you. Have a daily spiritual routine. And this can consist of very simple, 5 to 10 minutes a day. Sit down and speak to God. Not Quran, not prayer. Of course, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But firstly, 5 to 10 minutes, just speak to God. Sit down on the prayer mat, put everything aside, and just tell Him in sujood, or just sit down as you're speaking to a friend, Ya Allah, informally, normally. This is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm experiencing. I just want to tell you. I want to let it off my chest to you. And believe and feel like His presence. Now you accompany this with 5 to 10 minutes of Quran. Read 1 page of Quran a day. 1 page of Quran where you're just trying to reflect and connect to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's God trying to tell me in this surah? And of course, as you develop this relationship with Allah, with the Holy Quran, you then try and develop a relationship with Sahib al-Zaman. The same way you had a conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember the Imam. There's a famous scholar that once put in his book, in the introduction of his book, he said, if you want to know how your relationship with Sahib al-Zaman is going to be, look at your relationship with the Quran. Right? Because He's the Quran al-Natiq. He's the walking, talking Quran. So as you're developing your relationship with Allah, you develop your relationship with the Holy Quran, you develop your relationship with Sahib al-Zaman. This relationship, this trifecta, this relationship can help eliminate anxiety. Because ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. And of course, I want to conclude with this ayah on this point, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Ankabut, He says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا. And if you really, really try, if you strive in our way, and those that strive for us, we will guide them to our ways. We We are the ones that are going to guide you. I know you have anxiety. Anxiety is completely tied to the future. You're afraid of what's going to happen in the future. If you strive and you keep us at the forefront of your intention, we will guide you to the way. Don't worry, everything is going to be okay. But if I'm at the forefront of your intention, if I'm not at the forefront of your intention, then it's very, very likely you're going to feel anxious. And all the breathing techniques and all of the journaling, if you have not really like doubled down on your intention with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they might not serve their ultimate purpose. Because you might relieve yourself from anxiety in the moment, but if it constantly comes up and it constantly comes up and it constantly comes up, and you don't have a strong spiritual foundation, you might lose hope. You might lose hope in yourself, you might lose hope in breathing and BMW and everything. So having that strong foundation. So thank you very much for bearing with me. I told you there's going to be a lot of information in tonight's talk, but hopefully by now we've had more of a holistic understanding and overlook and overview of anxiety. And I know this topic can be like, we can delve deep into each one of these elements for hours and hours. But just to recap, today we've explored what is anxiety, what are the mechanisms of anxiety, what are the causes of anxiety. We've talked about reframing and the different techniques of reframing, and we've mentioned the inner kingdom framework and how we can perceive and reframe our emotions as guardians, and some short-term and long-term strategies to overcome anxiety by not observing anxiety as an enemy, but as a guardian. And inshallah, with that we can return to the profound quote of Imam alayhi salam, and we'll conclude with it. That your remedy is within you, but you do not sense it. Your sickness is from you, but you do not perceive it. You presume that you are a small entity, but within you is enfolded the entire universe. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali bayti at-tayyibin at-tahirin.